Chapter 1. The Box in the Back. They chose Sunday on purpose. Not Monday, that would feel official. Not Saturday, that would feel emotional. Sunday was neutral, practical, in between. The house was quieter than usual. Their daughter was at a friend's place. Their son hadn't called from college in 3 days, which was normal and somehow still disappointing. Cardboard boxes were stacked in the hallway like silent witnesses. "Closet first?" Daniel asked. Rachel nodded. The hallway closet had always been the place where things went to disappear. Old coats, Christmas wrapping paper, extension cords that might still work. It smelled faintly of dust and something sweet, maybe an old candle that had melted years ago. They pulled everything out onto the floor. There was no fighting. That part had already happened months ago, in smaller, sharper conversations about schedules and distance and the word fine used too often. Now they worked like polite co-workers closing an office. Rachel handed him a stack of photo albums. "Keep or scan?" "Scan," he said. "Neutral. Efficient." At the back of the closet, behind a plastic storage bin labeled Taxes 2011 to 2014, Daniel found a smaller box, plain, no label. He almost didn't mention it. But something about the weight of it, lighter than expected, made him pause. "Hey," he said. "What's this?" Rachel looked over from the floor, a coil of tangled lights in her lap. No idea. He opened it carefully, like it might contain something fragile. Inside was a VHS tape, black plastic, white handwritten label, June 12th, 2004. For a second, neither of them spoke. Rachel felt it before she fully registered what she was looking at. That strange tightening in the chest, like walking into a room you used to live in. "That's..." she started. "Our wedding?" Daniel finished. The handwriting was hers. She recognized the slight tilt of the letters, the way she pressed too hard with pens back then. "I thought we lost that," she said. "We probably meant to convert it," he replied, "like everything else." They both smiled, faint, automatic. The smile faded just as quickly. There was no VCR in the house anymore. Of course there wasn't. They had replaced things over the years: televisions, phones, furniture, even the kitchen table. Somehow, the tape survived. Rachel picked it up. It felt heavier now. "You want to throw it out?" she asked. The question came out too quickly. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, the way he hadn't in a while. There were new lines around her eyes, a silver thread in her hair near her temple. He wondered when that had happened. "No," he said. "I don't think I do." Silence settled between them. Not hostile. Not warm either. Just present. "I think my dad still has a VCR in the basement," Daniel added. "He refuses to get rid of anything." Rachel let out a soft laugh. It surprised both of them. That sounds right. They sat there on the hallway floor, surrounded by the artifacts of a shared life. Birthday decorations, old report cards, a snow globe from their honeymoon in Vermont. The tape lay between them. 18 years ago, they had stood in front of 120 guests and promised things with absolute certainty. Forever had sounded simple then. Rachel ran her thumb over the plastic edge. "I don't remember what we said," she admitted. Daniel swallowed. "I do," he said quietly. "At least some of it." She looked at him, curious despite herself. "What?" He hesitated, not because he didn't remember, but because he wasn't sure if it still belonged to them. "You said you hoped we'd never become polite with each other." The words hung in the air. Polite. They both glanced at the half-packed boxes, the labeled piles. the careful tone they had perfected. Rachel exhaled slowly. That didn't age well, she said. No, he agreed. Another silence. Different this time. Thicker. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds of a neighborhood that had watched them move in as newlyweds and would soon watch them move out separately. Daniel picked up the tape again. Before tomorrow, he said, not looking at her. We should probably watch it. Rachel's instinct was to refuse, to protect the version of herself that had already begun detaching, the one that had practiced saying, "We just grew apart." But another part of her, smaller, quieter, was curious. Curious about the girl who wrote that label in blue ink. Curious about the man she had once chosen without hesitation. Okay, she said. Just that. Not hopeful, not defeated. Just okay. They put the tape back in the box, but not in the closet. This time, Daniel placed it on the kitchen counter, visible, between them and Monday, as if it were something that needed to be reckoned with before signatures were made permanent. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both understood. Tomorrow, they would file for divorce. Tonight, they would press play. Chapter 2. Press play. Daniel's father did in fact still have a VCR. It was in the basement under a folded treadmill and next to 3 boxes labeled cables, important. The machine looked indestructible, dusty, but loyal. You're the only person I know who still owns one of these, Daniel had said. His father shrugged. Everything comes back. Rachel wasn't sure that was true. They carried the VCR home like contraband. Neither of them explained to anyone what it was for. By the time they connected the cables to the living room TV, it was dark outside. The house felt different at night now, less like a home, more like a place in transition. Daniel held the tape for a moment before inserting it. You don't have to, Rachel said. I know. He slid it in anyway. The screen flickered blue, then gray static, then a shaky frame of bright June sunlight and someone's thumb partially covering the lens. A familiar laugh burst through the speakers. Rachel felt it in her chest. Oh my God, she whispered. The camera adjusted. The church came into focus, flowers everywhere, guests fanning themselves with programs, and then her, 28, hair pinned loosely at the back of her neck, shoulders bare, eyes wide in a way she hadn't seen in years. Daniel leaned forward without realizing it. Wow, he said softly. On the screen, she was laughing at something off camera, nervous, alive, completely unguarded. That doesn't even look like me, she murmured. It does, he said. It's just earlier. The video cut abruptly to Daniel pacing in a small room, adjusting his tie. He looked thinner, less certain, but determined. Rachel studied him. You were terrified, she said. I was, he admitted. On screen, one of his groomsmen asked, Cold feet? Daniel had shaken his head immediately. No, just don't want to mess this up. Rachel swallowed. They watched themselves walk down the aisle, watched the way Daniel's face changed when he saw her. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't dramatic. It was relief. Pure, visible relief. Rachel covered her mouth with her hand. I forgot that look, she said. I didn't, Daniel replied. The ceremony began. The sound wavered. Wind rushed against the microphone. The officiant spoke. Guests shifted in their seats. Then it was time for their vows. They hadn't used traditional ones. They had insisted on writing their own. Rachel on the screen unfolded a small piece of paper. Her voice shook at first. I can't promise we won't change, she read, but I promise I'll try to know you in every version. In the living room, neither of them moved. I promise to ask what you're afraid of, her younger voice continued, even when it's easier not to. Daniel stared at the TV like he was watching a stranger. The video cut to him. I promise, he said on screen, eyes locked on hers, that if we ever start to feel far apart, I'll be the first to say it. Not the last. Silence filled the room. The tape kept playing. Applause, laughter, someone crying too loudly in the background. But Rachel muted it. They sat there, the frozen image of their younger selves glowing on the screen. We did change, she said finally. Yeah, we just stopped knowing each other. Daniel nodded slowly. I think we stopped asking. The house creaked. The refrigerator hummed. Familiar sounds. Suddenly heavy. Rachel leaned back against the couch. When did it happen? She asked. I don't know, he said. Maybe when everything got busy. The startup that failed. The second job she took quietly. The nights they collapsed into bed facing opposite directions. The years that weren't catastrophic, just cumulative. On the TV, they were dancing now, badly, laughing, completely offbeat. Rachel let out a broken sort of laugh. We thought love would carry itself, she said. We thought it would feel like that forever, Daniel replied. On screen, someone shouted, "Kiss her again." He did. In the living room, 18 years later, they sat 2 feet apart on the same couch. Not enemies, not lovers. Something in between. Rachel looked at him. Do you still feel relief? She asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. He took his time answering. I feel tired, he said honestly, but not relieved. That landed somewhere deep. She nodded. I don't feel relieved either. The word divorce had started to feel like oxygen lately, a way to breathe, but now it felt premature. The tape continued playing, cake cutting, awkward toasts, her father tearing up during his speech. Then the screen went blue again. End of tape. Daniel reached for the remote but didn't turn the TV off. Tomorrow, he said quietly. Rachel stared at the blank screen. Yeah. He stood to unplug the VCR. She didn't stop him. But she didn't stand up either. Instead, she said something neither of them had planned to say that night. Maybe we don't file tomorrow. Daniel froze. Not hopeful, not afraid, just listening. Not because everything's fixed, she added quickly. It's not, I know. But maybe we owe them, she nodded toward the dark TV. At least a conversation. Daniel exhaled slowly. A real one? He asked. Yes, not polite, not logistical, not about who keeps the couch. A real one. He sat back down. Okay, he said. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Inside, 2 people who had once promised to speak first when things felt far apart sat in the quiet. Not magically healed, but no longer pretending there was nothing left to say. Monday was still coming, but for the first time in months, it didn't feel inevitable. Chapter 3. The things we didn't say. They didn't turn the TV off. The blue screen glowed in the dark like an unanswered question. Rachel pulled her knees up onto the couch, the way she used to when they were first married, and stayed up too late talking about nothing and everything. Daniel noticed. He didn't comment on it. Okay, he said carefully. A real conversation. She nodded, then immediately looked unsure. Do we even remember how? Probably not, he admitted. But we used to. That almost made her smile. Silence stretched again, not empty this time, but fragile. Like thin ice, neither of them wanted to crack the wrong way. Rachel went first. Not because she was braver, because she was tired of carrying it. I've been lonely, she said. The words sat between them, simple and exposed. Daniel didn't argue, didn't defend. Me too, he replied. It would have been easier if one of them had betrayed the other. If there had been a single moment to point at and say, there, that's when it broke. But there wasn't. There were only years. I think, she continued slowly, somewhere along the way I stopped telling you when I was overwhelmed. Because you already looked overwhelmed. He nodded, eyes fixed on his hands. I stopped telling you when I was scared about money, he said. After the startup failed. I felt like I'd already disappointed you. You didn't, she said immediately. He looked up. I know that now, he replied. But back then, it felt like I had to fix it alone. Rachel felt something twist inside her. I was working 2 jobs, she said quietly. I didn't tell you how exhausted I was because I thought you already felt like a failure. He closed his eyes. So we both tried to protect each other, he said, and ended up alone. There it was. Not anger, not cruelty. Just 2 people who had mistaken silence for strength. Daniel leaned back and stared at the ceiling. I think I started resenting you for being capable, he admitted. You handled everything. The kids, the house, the schedules. You didn't seem to need me, Rachel blinked. I needed you, she said. I just didn't want to add more to your plate. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. That's unbelievably ironic. She nodded. I know. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Rachel swallowed. There's something else. He braced himself. Instinct. I don't think I've been unhappy because I stopped loving you, she said carefully. I think I've been unhappy because we stopped choosing each other on purpose. That one hit. He didn't answer right away, because he knew it was true. Love had become assumed. Maintenance had become optional. We became roommates who share history, he said. And bills, she added. He looked at her then. Really looked. You know what scared me most about filing tomorrow? She shook her head. That I wasn't heartbroken, he said. I was just numb. Rachel felt tears rise unexpectedly. I was scared of that too. The numbness had felt like confirmation, proof that it was over. But sitting here, watching their younger selves promise not to become polite, the numbness felt less like truth and more like neglect. The kind that happens slowly. I don't want to go back to who we were, Rachel said. Me neither. We were naive. Very. They both smiled faintly. But I don't want to end us because we forgot how to talk. Daniel nodded. Then what do we do? That was the real question. Not whether they loved each other, but whether they were willing to do the uncomfortable work of knowing each other again. Rachel thought about the girl on the screen, the way she had said, I promise I'll try to know you in every version. I think, she said slowly, we start small. Small how? We go to dinner, not to discuss logistics, not to argue, just to sit across from each other and ask questions. He raised an eyebrow. Like strangers? Maybe we are, she said gently. That didn't feel insulting. It felt honest. Daniel considered it. And if we still feel nothing, he asked. Then we file, she replied. But at least we'll know we didn't leave quietly. That mattered. He stood up and walked to the kitchen. The divorce papers were on the counter, neatly stacked. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he slid them into a drawer. Not ripped, not dramatic, just postponed. Rachel watched him do it. Dinner, he said. Friday? She nodded. Friday. They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. But when they turned off the lights and walked upstairs, they didn't walk separately either. Not touching. Just side by side. For the first time in a long time, Monday wasn't the end. It was just another day. And somewhere in the house, a tape sat rewound. Proof that once they had known exactly how to choose each other. The question now wasn't whether they still loved, it was whether they were willing to try again. Final chapter. Friday night. Friday came faster than either of them expected. All week nothing dramatic happened. They still went to work, still paid bills, still passed each other in the kitchen with ordinary questions. But Stota Ismanilis, not the marriage, the attention. Rachel caught herself watching Daniel when he wasn't looking. The way he frowned slightly when concentrating. The way he still drank coffee too late in the day. Daniel noticed the way she hummed absent-mindedly while checking emails. He hadn't heard that in years. Or maybe he just hadn't been listening. Friday evening felt strangely like a first date. Rachel stood in the bedroom longer than necessary, debating between two sweaters, as if this were someone new she needed to impress. Downstairs, Daniel changed his shirt twice. They didn't comment on it. The restaurant was the same one where they'd celebrated their first anniversary. It hadn't changed much. Dim lights, wooden tables, soft music that didn't demand attention. They sat across from each other. For a moment, the old reflex appeared. So, how was work? Rachel caught it mid-air. No, she said gently. Not that, Daniel nodded. Okay. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. She went first. What are you afraid of right now? The question landed between them like something fragile. He didn't deflect. I'm afraid, he said slowly, that we already missed the window, that we waited too long. She nodded. I'm afraid, she replied, that if we divorce, we'll both be fine, and that will mean this didn't matter as much as I thought. He leaned back, absorbing that. It mattered, he said, not defensive, just certain. I know, she whispered. That's what scares me. Dinner arrived. They barely touched it. Instead, they asked things they hadn't asked in years. What do you want the next 10 years to look like? Do you still dream about moving somewhere quieter? When did you feel most alone? When did you feel closest to me? There were no grand revelations, no hidden affairs, no secret resentments, just accumulation, fatigue, neglect. At some point, Daniel reached across the table, instinct, not strategy, and brushed his thumb over the back of her hand. She didn't pull away. The contact was small, almost awkward, but it wasn't polite, it wasn't automatic. It was chosen. Later, walking back to the car, Rachel said, I don't want to go back to who we were. Good, Daniel said. I don't either. I want something quieter, more deliberate. He opened her car door the way he used to, years ago, before routine had swallowed gestures. I think, he said, we have to treat this like something new. She looked at him carefully. Are you willing to? He didn't answer immediately. Because this was the real moment. Not the wedding tape, not the closet. This. Yes, he said, but only if we both are. Rachel thought about Monday, about the drawer, about how easy it would be to choose the clean break, the simple narrative. We grew apart. Instead, she chose something harder. I am. They didn't tell anyone, not the kids, not their friends. There was no announcement. They just began again. Therapy on Wednesdays, dinner out twice a month, phones down after 9, and conversations, real ones, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes clumsy. There were setbacks, old habits resurfaced. They snapped, they withdrew, they got tired. But this time, when distance crept in, one of them said it first, not the last. 6 months later, Daniel opened the drawer. The divorce papers were still there. He held them for a moment, Then he fed them slowly into the shredder. The sound was mechanical, ordinary, final. Rachel watched from the doorway. "You sure?" she asked. He looked at her, not the girl from the tape, not the stranger from the couch. The woman in front of him, changed, older, real. "Yes," he said. Not because everything was perfect, but because they were choosing. Later that night, they sat on the couch again. No blue screen, no tape, just quiet. Rachel rested her head against his shoulder, not dramatically, not symbolically, just because it felt right. Love didn't look like it had at 28. It was less electric, more intentional, less automatic, more aware. And maybe that was the difference. Marriage hadn't ended. It had almost faded. But this time, they were paying attention. And sometimes, that's the only thing that saves anything. If this story felt close to home, don't just close the video and move on. Call someone. Ask the question you've been avoiding. Say the thing you've been postponing. Press play on a memory before you press send on something permanent. And if you believe relationships are worth fighting for, even quietly, subscribe to this channel. There are more stories here about second chances, forgotten promises, and the courage to try again. Sometimes the ending isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just two people deciding, one more time, to stay. If that matters to you, stay with us.